You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hi, this is Mike Balzer. Well, we're almost not morning here on the Pacific Coast, but today, unlike our Saturday 3D in review, this is the 3D Tech Closet. And I again apologize for being late, but I thought I'd get a little bit of demo footage recorded before starting the show. Well, we've got a few things to cover today. Uh, Obviously, the first item is to continue with the Brekel motion capture. In this particular case, we're going to be looking at the facial capture system, almost identical interface, except obviously capturing your face. And my what do you want to call it, demoing of the product about a week and a half ago, I found that there was no problems with it. It seemed to work pretty good, and so we're going to get into that in a moment. The other things we're going to be covering is the budget VR backpack, as well as a low cost macOS VR system that I've been kind of tinkering with. If you're working with macOS, you may have noticed that the solutions are either extremely expensive or impractical because of the video card that they have chosen to use. So, with that being the case, I decided to create a Hackintosh, and we're going to go through the steps, actually show one in action so that you can take a look at it for yourself, and why I went in that direction. And even though I own a few Macs, one of the things that a lot of people complained about is they've never really had an open box, and I'm not a big fan of the AMD Radeon um, video cards. But with that being the case, I'm an NVIDIA fan, and I wanted to create something compact and small, and so that's the direction I went. So that should be it. Sadly, if you were hoping to get into converting the Brekel animation skeleton to Unreal, I will have to push that off till next week. So, and the reason for that is I still haven't found, I guess, the right inexpensive tools to do it properly. And I actually want to probably spend most of the hour doing that. All right, with that, let's jump right into the first screen. And since it's actually up and running, we're going to go ahead and introduce the Brekel. And I actually fixed my monitor problem the other day, so we should see a full screen on my particular laptop I'm using for this. All right, I'm going to speak loudly so that you can hear me. But essentially, what you do is you set up again like the Brekel motion capture system. You use the Microsoft Connect version 2, and again a little bit of a explanation of the difference. The original Connect that came with the Xbox was based on structured light. The second version of this, and actually it's like third or fourth iteration of the Connect, was they use time of flight. So part of the cool factor with that is you get a little bit more precision in the capturing of joints and motion. Maybe not as much for the actual surface scanning that you can with the structure sensor, but then you really have to tweak the structure sensor to get any decent 3D scans of surfaces. But with this, I think it actually does a better job of tracking, as I mentioned in last week's show. So in this one, as you can see, I am actually talking, and you can see the screen as I'm making um, gestures with my mouth and speaking. Now, as I have learned and seen in other YouTube videos and examples, you really kind of have to play act and really make the expressions wide. And I think part of that is because of the type of tracking system. And I've turned on the actual face points, and as you can see, I've got eyebrow point, I got eyes. I do not know if it more than likely does not track, or maybe it does. I don't know. I haven't actually converted this into something yet, but I don't know if it tracks my eyes themselves as they move. But as you can see, the mouth has a lot of points on it, and as I talk, the gestures uh, do cause the mouth to move appropriately. Now, if you notice, I've got a low light and running at 15 frames per second. I don't know if that's something running in the background, more than likely. Maybe what I can do is, let's see, shut some things down and maybe that will help. And then yeah, I'll reach out to Jasper and ask him why this might be. Again, keep in mind that my laptop here is a i7. I guess it's not a Kaby Lake, the one before that, and also a GTX 1070 with 4 GB of memory. So I think I have at least the horsepower to be running this on a laptop. So I'm not quite sure where I'm only seeing 15 frames per second. I did notice maybe I'll do that right now. I did notice if I turn off other video screens, so maybe I'll do that right now. So if everything goes awry, oh well. So here we go. Okay. So no, it doesn't seem to improve it, but it gives us a larger screen so you can actually see me moving. Now notice that not only do I have the points, but also have a neck and head um, skeleton joints as well. So as I move my head back and forth, notice how the skeleton moves. I did notice, and I wanted to go ahead and make sure that my screen was set up properly before starting the show. But it did seem to take a little bit of time before it actually found my face and tracked. It didn't seem as quick as the full body. And again, I'll reach out to Jasper if that's just my problem. But I noticed I had to kind of remain still for a couple of minutes. In fact, sometimes I even put a hand in front of the camera and it seemed to lock on them. So like the previous version, you can turn off things like the points. You can turn off the head arm, which is back there. We can turn off the face mask, which is in a good day. And we can also turn off the skeleton. So all we have is the actual mask itself. So it's kind of eerie to watch myself talk, but notice there's a slight delay. Ta, but obviously, if you're recording this, you will not see that. And again, it's because of whatever the latency is between my system and this output. Now, I do know that maybe since this requires a continuous USB 3 stream, one of the things about the Connect version 2 is that it does require a USB 3 port and the stream is pretty intense. And so it's got to do that. I noticed in a couple of other products that I saw that this was an issue as well. So make sure your USB 3 ports are up to the standards as well. All right, so let's see what else we've got. Um, so I haven't hit recording, and like the previous version, it's very simple. You just hit start recording. So I'm going to go ahead and do so. All right, it beeps at me. So I'm now recording, and it tells me, if you notice, tracking the frames per second, and then the drawing the frames per second below that in yellow. You may not be able to see that at 720p, but I am recording this at 1080p. It also gives you both the memory and CPU. Some CPU is not that intense. So again, I'm going to talk to Jasper why this might be an issue with my particular machine, um, and maybe tweak with it a little bit better. For now, though, I am just trying to test it out and make sure that I'm capable of actually capturing my motion. So as you can see, if you've already got a Connect version 2, and you can probably pick one up for about $100, $200. I don't think they make them anymore, but if you can find them, you might want to do it, because not only can you do the facial tracking, but you can do the full body motion tracking. And I think Jasper has a bundle for the two together. And as you can see, the software is fairly easy. All right, I'm going to see if I can do this without disrupting my face. Let's see. So we can identify our outputs. And as Jasper mentioned, you might just want to make sure that you're doing an FBX. I think from what I've read in the software, it is a blended um, facial capture. So you'll need to make sure that whatever model you use has blended inputs, and so that it will allow it to deform the facial features. And again, that's something that I'm going to have to test with the model that I created in Mixamo and see how easy it is to apply these to that. So there's still a lot of work to do, but the fact that you can capture it very reasonably in price and fairly accurately is, this hasn't really been done before at this price structure. And I know that there's some single video camera modes, but again, it's tracking with one camera, and so that means it's only determining information from a 2D perspective, where this solution, the Brekel facial masking, actually is looking at 3D points. Let me go ahead and turn those back on again so that you can see this. So there you go. And if I turn my head, notice that they change on both X, Y, and Z. So that is a huge benefit. And the fact is that I can, as you can see, a fairly complex facial mask there. Um, but like anything else, you're going to have to play with it, experiment with it. Jasper does provide a 7-day demo, full usage, and then you can go out to his website to actually see the price. I think it's like $150. Don't quote me on that. We'll go to that website after I'm finished demoing it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And then like in the previous, it's saving it. I should be able, actually, let's see, I turned it off. I don't see a mode to actually play it back like you had in the previous version, but again, I dropped out some of the windows, so I don't know how to bring up the windows. So let me close this message box. There we go. So it gives us a larger screen to work with. So here's our preview. So let's go ahead and play back what we just did. So it should be able to record audio as well. Yes, there is a capability, and I do have it enabled. Um, However, I do not see audio or hear audio coming out of it, so I don't know. And I noticed that in the motion tracking either, it didn't include it. Um, but as you can see, I'm previewing, and this was what it was capturing earlier. And it also saved it out to an FBX file for me. And I'm going to go ahead and stop it. So if you like the take, you can just hit keep take, and then it obviously clears out that window so it no longer exists. And let's see what we have here. Oh, see, I just disappeared. Oh, that came back pretty quickly. All right, so we can actually export the video along with it and different versions of it. So if you wanted to verify your video as well as the tracking information, it's available. Um, your 3D output formats, you have FBX, BVH again, Poser and DAZ. Now this is a very interesting, and I can probably try this out. So let me go ahead and enable that. And then CryEngine, but I don't see anything for, let's say, Unreal or Unity. But as mentioned, I was going to use the C# script that he built for Unity, but I didn't get time to do that. Excuse me, one of the things, I've got a cold. So let's see what we've got here. So I'm going to go ahead and record some more. So again, you go down to the bottom, hit start recording, and I will exaggerate my gestures. Ah, oh, ah, ooh, ah. Okay, I'm being silly. Ah, and we're going to go ahead and stop. There we go, and we should. Where's our preview? So that's kind of a cool mode. I can see where the camera is in front of my face. All right, so where did it go? I don't have the ability to play. I don't know how. So clearly you have to spend a little, oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Here's the tab for the preview. All right, so let's take a look at the, oh, I just said keep take. Oh, well. Let's see, should be able to still play it there. Okay, so as I already identified, keep take, which we did already. So we're back to the main screen. So I now have it recorded. Don't know where I put it. And yeah, so it's in a user folder on my desktop. So I should have a bunch of files now on my desktop. Now, it's funny. Let's do this. Okay. So let's look at these. There's the poser file, but I don't have poser on this, but I should be able to bring this right into poser and the blend should match right up to the faces. So right now it's kind of funny. You can buy the latest version of poser for about $50. And if you haven't tried it, not only do you get a lot of models, now you'll have to keep in mind if you use them for animation or other tool functions, can't even talk, functions, you may have to um, pay a little extra for licensing using their models. It also has some low resolution capabilities so that you can take one of their models and reduce the number of polygons in order to use it in a gaming or a video animation format. So, like I said, it's about $50 now. You get the pro version, and then there's a new version coming out, 11.1, that adds some new features. So, you might want to take advantage of that if you don't have it. It's just a nice, great tool to have. I've used it on occasion. It's got a new fast rendering mode as well as their standard rendering mode, which is okay. I mean, it's actually not as good as some of the others that you can buy, but it suits my purposes sometimes. And it's a cool little tool, and you can get a lot of assets. So if you're working with humans, there's a lot of models. Plus, if you're familiar with DAZ 3D, they have a free unit. This I think can be imported into DAZ 3D as well. So immediately you can take this information and apply it to the facial gestures of the model there. Again, I'll do a little demo next week on that because I'll also be doing the skeleton restructuring. So I'll wait till next week. But let's take a look at this. Now, I did notice that when I brought it in, oops, wrong screen. Okay, open with the FBX reviewer. So there's the mask, but sadly, all we get is the skeleton movements. Notice the mask itself isn't moving. That's because the FBX reviewer from Autodesk does not apply blend uh, motions. But you can see that I'm moving. And like I said, I will work with this a little bit later in some other applications next week. So I'll capture a little bit more interesting recitals of some of the Vincent van Gogh letters that he wrote, because I have an ultimate goal in doing this. And again, because of the Brekel scanning system, scanning, motion capture and facial capture, I should be able to move forward with that without having to spend a lot of money or provide external services to do this. Okay, so I think that's about it. Let's jump out to my main screen. Where is it at? Where are you at? There we go. Okay, so let me go ahead and set this up. So let's go out to Brekel. All right, so if you want to buy either the Pro Body or version 2. Again, I highly recommend the version 2 because it works with the new version 2 Connect that you can buy separately. You don't have to buy an Xbox One. In fact, that's what I've been using. It's a little cumbersome. It has like an extension power module and then a separate box, little tiny box that you actually hook up to your USB 3 port. And so let's see what the cost is of that. And I guess I would have to actually go to pricing. Let's go to shop. Get it. Okay, so let's see. So $139, as mentioned, around $100. So that's pretty good. And then, like I said, you can get a trial version for 7 days. So if you want to test it out before spending money on it, you can do so. Now let's jump back. And the motion tracking, or the Pro Face, is also 139. Now, I thought I saw, let me see, I thought there was a combo price. Jump back. Maybe there's something. Yeah, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm pretty sure there is. Let's go to the shop. Maybe it's in here. Or are we already there? Okay. Yep. So right here, you can get a bundle of the two together for $239, which I guess, let's see, 139. That's actually a $39 off. So that's a pretty good deal. Essentially 139 for each of them. So you're actually um, discounting this $39. So that's not really bad. Obviously, you have to go ahead and obtain a Connect version 2 in order to use it. But if you've ever looked at other motion and facial tracking systems, they can be quite expensive. So uh, I don't know. I'm just kind of amazed that Jasper has offered such a great deal on this stuff. Now, the other thing that as soon as I get my geez, can't even talk, HTC Vive trackers, so that I have two handsets as well as two trackers, I'm going to be trying out the Brekel OpenVR recording system, which is 139. So they're all $139. And what this will allow me to do is use the actual HTC Vive to do motion tracking. And since it's an actual OpenVR recorder, he records the tracking information for all the devices, headset, the handsets, the trackers, and I can't remember exactly, but it's a fairly large number of trackers that it will record. So, and this is what makes his a little different than others, but I won't be able to do this until my actual tracker units come in, which I'm thinking should be here by the end of the month or maybe next month. All right, so there you go. There's his full product features. Highly recommended. As mentioned, I've got a review. I'll put it in the show notes for this later on. I did an interview with him. Gosh, was it latter part of 2015, if I remember correctly? And not only does he provide great products, but he has a great heart. I don't know if you've watched the interview, but I had not found out about this until I actually did a little research on him. But he was part of, oh, no, I can't think of the name of it now. I think it was Sweetie Pie. So it was a sting operation to get pedophiles, and he created, they brought him in with his motion capture technique to provide authentic motion tracking. They essentially had a adult actor mimic the facial gestures and head motions of a child, and then was able to use this in real time to interact with pedophiles. And the sting operation was extremely successful, and a lot of that information in Europe. You can go out, there's a couple of articles on it as well as a few videos. So I was very touched by that, and the fact is that he basically gave his time away to do that. And with these low costs, it seems like a little bit of a no-brainer to move in the direction and look at his stuff if you're planning to do motion tracking. Uh, Include, I mean, not only have the Connect, but if you've got an HTC Vive and you have a few extra trackers, you might want to look at that too. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. So this is going to be a little different. So let me go back to my main camera. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. Don't have a lot of room back here. And like I said, let me take a sip of my coffee here and move it out of the way so I don't spill it, which I've done before. All right, so I'm going to close down my laptop and make some room. So as mentioned, I was going to do kind of an update on the budget VR backpack. And I finally, it's been months now, come up with a solution. And I'll show this little video that I did today. And I actually sat outside, as I've shown previously, if you've been following the show. Let me go ahead. So there you go. And I'll have some close-ups of it here in a moment. It's kind of clunky. I will have to create a custom case, but there's some reasons for that, and we'll go over them. But the most important thing, and I guess I'll show that in a camera, is that this works with Anton Bauer or Sony V-Lock batteries, which are fairly reasonable, about $100 to $200, depending on the wattage. And this one's an 80 watt battery, and I was able to get about 45 minutes to an hour's worth of probably more like 45 minutes, which is not that much, but you can buy up to 160 and get about an hour. So this is something that I think is pretty useful for what I'm doing. And if you noticed in that, and let me jump back. 2, 3. I'm using the Acer version of the Microsoft mixed reality headset. And the cool thing that I found before hooking up to my little mini Nook belt system is that because of the type of inside out tracking, you don't have to be inside. In fact, if you've got enough uh, unique or visuals, for instance, if you notice there's some bushes behind me in this, um, it allows you to use that for positional tracking, and obviously with an IMU built into it, you can move your head. So this really isn't the best example, and I didn't have enough time before starting the show to show other things, but which is actually moving around the deck back there. But because I'm able to move my head back and forth and actually move around in any space, as long as you have enough unique, what do you want to call it, visual objects in the room, this thing should track pretty well. And so I've been very pleased with its performance. Now, obviously, the best unit they say that's out there right now is the Samsung Odyssey, which I will probably pick up. But the Acer is okay, and so as well as the Dell. But I think I'll get one of those. It has supposedly the best resolution. It's a little bit higher. Also uses OLED instead of LCD, and has a little bit more FOV, about 110 versus about 100 with these. And even some people have complained that you still have that binocular effect. But I think if you have a good enough immersion application, that kind of goes away pretty quickly. Now, some people have been talking about the Pimax 8K system, and I talked about that on my show, and I won't do it here. I had the 4K version, and it left a lot to be desired. And I think they may have had some good prototypes, but to move that into a commercial product and have the proper drivers and support is going to be something that we're going to have to look and see on. So I'm not going to spend my money at that time. If it's successful, then I'll be able to buy one later on. Okay, so let's go. Let's see what screen. I think we'll go with this one here. Let's see, or do I have another screen? Uh, yeah, we'll go with this one. Okay, so this is the behind my shoulder tracking system. So let me move this keyboard and let me bring it up. And so one of the things that I found very inexpensively on Amazon, and we're going to go through, I have a special Amazon price list for this. This is an LCD panel with a touch plate. So literally it's a capacitant touch plate, and so not a resistive. So I'm actually able to use this as a little mini screen in order for me to be able to use the backpack. Now, there's an important note, and I actually wrote or tweeted about this to the Microsoft group that's running it, why you can't disconnect an external monitor. And there's some tricks that you can do in order to make it look like there's an external monitor. But since you have to actually get into the mixed reality system and you could create a script at startup, I found that this little panel is good because you can use it using the tablet mode to get into your applications. And then once you're in there, you can obviously do anything that you want in the Cliff House or in the Steam system. Okay, so there's a little panel. You can buy one of these for, I don't know, $35, $40. So they're inexpensive. This version also comes with a little acrylic cutout. So in order to support the screen itself. It doesn't look pretty, but it's very functional. All right, so let's get to the backpack. So here it is. And I apologize for the mic noise. And we should be able to see, yeah, without taking it apart. So let's do this. There we go. Okay, so essentially, this is a box by a company that makes very lightweight acrylic mini ITX boxes with room for a low profile video card. Now, as mentioned, I created a Nook belt version, which is much more compact. But the sad thing is, it does not include a graphics card, and because it doesn't have a graphics card, this can create some problems for better resolution, performance, but also creates some problems as far as designing something that runs off a battery. Notably, having a there we go. Notably, ensuring that the unit itself runs effectively off of a DC power supply. And there is a company called Minibox, which I'll also make sure that there's a link in the show notes, that has a variety of 12 volt to ATX power supplies. They're very compact. They fit in the actual ATC, or excuse me, ATX power socket on your motherboards. And they range, well, their versions only go up to about 160 watts, but they have some other versions that can be mounted in a car. So what I did is I originally worked with the 160, but because you were limited to specifically, without very little deviation, a 12 volt power supply, that would not work with the Anton Bauer or the Sony V-Lock batteries, because they're at 14.8 volts. And when I tested it, that's the first thing that I found out. Since then, I've used a couple of boards. I had a smaller board, but sadly, one thing that I found out is when you combine the video card and the CPU, it requires more than the 75, 85 watts that some of these boards put out. So I eventually decided to go with a board, and it's not that expensive, about $75, that allows you to go from about 11 volts. It actually has a very wide range of voltages to like 35, but is a 220 or 250 watt board. Ample power, not only to supply to the motherboard, but the video card. And that finally did it. Well, there was one other feature, and I'll actually show you that when I bring up the Mac system. But the other issue is the um, let's see, where am I going to say here? The actual power itself that goes to the video card, even though they claim that this card will run independently or off the PCIe bus, which is capable of 75 watts, I found that some of these mini ITX buses are a little bit underpowered. And more importantly, the one that I have in here is overclock. So even though it's rated at 75 watts, actually at 80 watts, it's a problem. So, with that being the case, it clearly creates some issues. And what I was doing, making sure that I wasn't getting any echo, since I wouldn't be able to hear it. And I don't think I have any, which is good. Okay, so let's get back to this. So, the card that I'm using is a low profile GTX 1050 Ti with 4 gigabytes of memory, and it is overclocked, so it runs a little faster. And I have found that I'm pretty much able to run everything, maybe not at the highest resolutions and performance, but I have been able to run things at a pretty fast clip. I was able to run, obviously, the Microsoft Cliff House with no problems, and then have been testing this with the uh, Steam VR system and their beta version of their home, and it seems to run okay. On top of that, I've been able to run most of the Steam stuff, including the lab, which for a while kept failing, and I think a lot of that had to do with not having an adequate power board. Okay, so what I'm going to do is fire this up. So I need to plug in the cables. So you can see this on the back here. This is a standard mini ITX case. In fact, it's got a Wi-Fi built into it. Sadly, this particular board, I tried to save a few dollars, did not have the Bluetooth, even though they indicated this is an MSI um, mini ITX board. They have different variants of it. Make sure you buy the one that actually has the Bluetooth included in it. Otherwise, you're going to have to buy a little Bluetooth module, which is what I did. They're only like $5. So you could go that route. I did go with an AC Wi Fi system because I wanted something to have pretty good performance. And since you're going to be using this on your back, and if you wanted to be connected to the internet, let's say you wanted to play a game, very important to have high performance Wi Fi as well. Okay, so I have, uh, we've talked about it before, but I have I can't remember, I think a lucite plate on the bottom that provides stability and then some cushion for your back. And then I found a strap for about $30, $40 uh, for a frame that actually cost a lot of money, but the strap itself was pretty inexpensive. So I bolted that into or onto this plate to create a full backpack, which is what you can see. Let me jump back to it. You can see in my image here. So it fits kind of in the lower part of your back. It's pretty comfortable. You can obviously adjust the straps a little better. It has both a strap for the top part of your chest as well as around your midsection. So it keeps it in place. Obviously, with the battery and the case itself, it's fairly lightweight, but there is some mass to it. So moving around, if you don't have it all tightened down, could be an issue. So if you're going to go this direction, make sure you have it all set up and tightened correctly. All right, so let's get back to the unit itself. So with the GTX card, it um, is situated vertically, one of the reasons why it's so tall, and it has multiple connections on the back, and it has two plates, one that has the DVI port, as well as two HDMI ports and a dual port. Now, the problem with the is it a dual port? Can't remember the standard, but I found that I couldn't use both of the HDMI, so I had to use the middle HDMI and the bottom dual port connector, which means I had a bulky cable for the dual port. I need to find a thinner one, but then I then ran it through this uh, extra, what do you want to call it? O-ring that I have here. I guess it's not really an O-ring, but clamp, so that I could run the cable for the different devices to the headset. So it keeps it from pulling on the actual connectors here. So it provides a little bit of tension relief. So the other cable that has to be provide is the USB, which is this particular board has two USB 3 ports in the front, and it also has the ability in the cable to run them to the front, or this case does, to run USB 3 to the front two ports as well, which is kind of cool. And then, like I said, I've got the Bluetooth as well as a wireless keyboard capability. But with this little panel here, which I'm going to fire up right now, I can plug in USB 2. I'm sorry, yeah, micro port, which is connected to it. And then also, let me find the, okay, so that's my headset. So, excuse me. All right, so I have it hooked up, and let's get the glare out. And let's fire it up. Now, if you look over here, the Anton Bauer has a battery level indicator, so we're about 75%. So this particular case has two switches in the front. They're a little, they should have been recessed a little bit more. It's easy to push them, especially the reset button, which I just basically unplugged. So the reset button on this doesn't work. but then I don't have to worry about resetting my machine when I don't want to by accidentally hitting the button. The power button is the inner switch, and I put in a nice little blue LED exhaust fan. I think this is 120 millimeter. And so what it does, I took the cowl off the card. So as you can see, I have a screen now. The one problem with this little LCD is that it doesn't recognize the touchscreen right away. So you have to unplug it and plug it back in. There we go. And it works just like a tablet. Okay. So there we go. It's up and running. So like I said, now I'm in the desktop mode, but I could flip it over as a tablet and have little icons set up here, and you can have as many as you want. And then I can immediately bring it up in the desktop. So actually, it's going to mirror the screen. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Okay. So here we go. So there you go. You can see part of my head with the screen on. So I'm now in it. I'm running off of the battery. So I'm completely independent. So as you saw in the previous little demo video, I can actually walk around outside and it's fairly lightweight. And depending on the size of the battery, which obviously is going to increase the weight, you can get anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And then if you wanted to create an even beefier system, you could put two batteries on top, put them in parallel, and then that way you could pull them in and out whenever you wanted to. Um, there's a couple of other tricks I did with this. It doesn't have a charging circuit in it. I didn't want to add the extra expense of that because I have a fast charger for these type of batteries. But I can hot swap with external power supported. I'm using a couple of Shockley diodes, and so it allows me to provide steering from the different voltages. I'm using a very high wattage 12-volt power supply. Supports about 180 watts, if I remember correctly. And then these batteries supply obviously 14.8 through this power circuit, and it seems to work well. So let me bring up a controller. And if you remember, it has these, and you might be able to see them. Yeah, you put it in here. They have these little lights, and they sit in front of it. So I can literally go in front and let me bring up my little test Van Gogh. And I can go in and select different apps. So this is the Van Gogh app. There, so I'm in. And you should be able to see the screen. So you're seeing what I'm seeing inside my panel that's being mirrored on the little LCD panel. Now, keep in mind, you can actually, and I'll go ahead and do it right now, you can unplug the power on this. Do not unplug the HDMI because if it loses the external HDMI panel, then it just basically shuts out of the mixed reality headset. So you can, though, disable there power, so it's off, but I still have a screen. So you could, I don't know how much power this little panel draws, but it's probably not that much. But keep in mind, you do have a limited amount of power through this battery, so this could be an issue. So let me plug it back in. Yep, and there you go. Immediately comes back up. And so let's try something else. I'm going to go ahead and get out of this. And the way you do that is just hit the little Microsoft button. So we're back. And now I'm going to go over and try out this. If you haven't tried, this is the Halo Recruit. And I'm going up an elevator, as you can see. So again, remember, this is the GTX 1050 Ti half height with 4 gigs of memory, running independently on a battery power supply for about 45 minutes. Now, if you've looked at any of the prices on uh, these backpack types machines, they're like about $2,000. Uh, so there's a little character for you. And again, so you can see all this through the little panel. So I've been very pleased with the output. Put that over here so you can see it. Oh, no. In my hand. It's kind of cool. All right, so I'll get out of this and back to the screen. So there you go. Like I said, I will have a show note to my Amazon parts list, and you can build this thing for about $800. Uh, you can obviously, this has an i5 Kaby Lake chip in it, or Kaby Lake, and 8 gigs of memory. I'm going to probably put another stick in. I think that's why I was failing with the lab. I was probably, especially since you're running through the Microsoft drivers in Steam, and so you still have this environment up as well as the Steam environment. And I think having both of those requires more memory than just 8 gigs. But I did find 8 gig works pretty well with the rest of the system here. So there you go. Pretty impressed with what you can buy today at a very reasonable price. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down and begin, because I have this little panel. I'll just hit the power button and do a shutdown. And like mentioned, I put in a 12-volt power coax connector here that with to a couple of, I think, what are they, 20 amp Shockley diodes, very big, thick things, so that I can steer it so it protects the battery from the voltage coming in from the 12-volt power supply and vice versa, so they don't burn one another out. So that way, when I put the 12-volt in, I can then detach the battery and this thing will stay up and running. Um, the connector now seems to be working pretty good. Make sure that if you buy something like this, you buy a Anton Bauer connector, the V-lock, and mount it fairly securely. Otherwise, if it has some problems making a connection, it could disrupt it. I had some problems earlier, but I think that was more because of the prototyping process. So again, it doesn't look pretty, but it's fairly lightweight. The height is a little bit high, but it seems to work. And for $800, you can put your money somewhere else. And unlike the other backpacks, you don't get a little panel like this. So even if you've got one, I would highly recommend getting a panel like that. Okay, so that's about it. Let me move this out of the way. Go back to this, and then we'll talk about the cheap Mac VR system that I created. All right, hang on. Okay, so here we go. Let me jump back to my screen. All right, so this is basically a very compact mini ITX case. The point that needs to be made with it is it does not have an internal power supply, but it does use one of those 160 watt mini box, 12 volt to ATX sockets, so that you can power the whole thing. It's fairly, actually, it has very little heat at all. As mentioned, what I said earlier, I then supplied an extra rail of 12 volts, even though there is not an actual connector. Do this that you can power it, unlike most of your uh, video cards. This one I had to actually solder it directly, and the actual through holes are a little bit of a pain to clear out, and then they're very small. I think this is meant for a fan, but they were hooked up to 12 volt, so I am supplying 12 volts through this to provide a little bit more power directly to the card itself. It has cleared up a couple of issues on the budget VR backpack, and it did seem to help here, but I think there are a few other issues. And then I cut out a slot so that I could run a an extension PCIe times 16, and I got one that's about 4 or 5 inches. So that way, obviously you want to reduce the lengths because you've got some fairly fast signals running through here. This is shielded, so it's fairly thick. And then I use some gaffer's tape to make sure that it stays protected and in place. And then this, I didn't do anything other than mount it with some 3M. No, I can't think of that. Tape, so it stays in place, and then just mounted it. And you may have to use a few layers, or you could create some standoffs, but there are no um, holes cut out in this in order to support it that way. Probably what I should do is design an actual rack that I can bolt onto this, that I can just slide it in like a standard video card from above. Same thing here, so that this hole is supported properly. But for my needs, it's not really moving around. This works more than adequate. And, obviously, if you're an Apple fan, you're probably puking right now at the horror that you see in front of you, but it is very functional. All right, so what I'm going to do is unplug the laptop video, and then I'm going to power this. So let me do this without spilling something. And we've lost my tracking camera. There we go. All right, so we don't need this here anymore. So here's my little 12 volt power supply. You can buy these for like less than $20. All right, so I'm going to put this under here, and then I plug that into the top port. Again, I found it a little wonky. You want to support your actual headset in the middle HDMI port here. So if you've got an HTC Vive, which is the only thing I think that works with this, so you'll have to plug it in there, and then there are 2 USB ports as well as 4 USB 2 ports on the back of this. This is a similar MSI board as what I used in the budget backpack, except it does not have the onboard Wi-Fi, which you can't really use on a Hackintosh. Intel, there really isn't any drivers for that. So you can buy these little USB, excuse me, Wi-Fi slash Bluetooth that you can just plug in, and it provides all that for you. Okay, so that turned over. Okay, so there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plug this in over here. So because I'm driving a video card with this, all right, so I've got a little Logitech keyboard, but it's not actually a Mac keyboard, but it should work for me just fine. Okay, so with that, I should be able to jump. Where is it at? To this. And if it works, I should have a screen.
You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Okay, so it comes up with the clover, and I'm going to go ahead and hit escape. Oh, keyboard works good. Okay, so it's already set up to boot out of High Sierra, and I've already set up the web drivers, so it should be ready to go. So I'll double click on it. Whoops, double click on it. How funny. So, in their infinite wisdom, but we have some tricks. Everything has a problem. I guess I should have used this one. All right, there we go. Woohoo! All right, so one of the things that Apple does is they use HDCP protection, and since I'm using obviously a device that can record output, now that I'm steaming it, I have to use these little special HDMI splitters. It also seem to split off the HDCP. So I'm going to go ahead and click. Yeah, and put in my password. So there we go. So why did I take the time to do this? Well, I had an old Mac that really wasn't doing much, but it was still upgradable. So I took that license and put it in here. And okay, so since I don't have any LAN, let's go ahead and plug some LAN in. Okay, so let's do that. So, what does it take to create your own Hackintosh? Well, for one, you need to go out to Tony Mac. Well, for one, you have to start with getting a legitimate license for Mac OS. And since I've upgraded this unit up to, what is it, 13.2 now, um, so you should be able to get all of that. With Tony Mac, they have a bootloader, and I'll go ahead and bring that up if I have Wi-Fi. So they talk about that. So you can go directly to the installation guide. And it tells you exactly what you need to do. And download their UniBeast. Make sure you get a UniBeast that supports the High Sierra. And then you essentially put the UniBeast on your other Mac. And then you create a version of the Mac OS with UniBeast that can be supported on a basic PC. And then you boot up into it, and then you allow UniBeast to install it. And then you come back, and there's some special steps. Now that they have a new multi-beast for High Sierra, it should be a little easier. Before, you actually had to go through and make some changes for it all to work properly. But with Mac, the multi-beast makes it a lot easier, and plus has drivers or text files for your audio card, LAN cards. But I found in my case, I didn't really need audio other than HDMI, and there's some scripts out there to activate that. And it seemed to come up directly with the HTC Vive, which I'm not going to run here, but it did work. And the cool thing is, now this is only an i3, but you can throw as much hardware as you want or as much video card as you want. Now, again, I'm on a budget, and I wanted to see if it's possible to actually be able to run VR, which it appears to be. And so the Steam, for whatever reason, not connecting. So we'll quit and start again. So since I don't actually have the HTC Vive up, I can't test it. I have found that it works great in Unity, which I will bring up. Make sure you get the latest version of the beta Unity. There isn't, there's a couple of videos out there. There really isn't any VR content through the Steam for Mac yet. A lot of them aren't going to be available to next year. But I've been testing my Van Gogh, what do you want to call it? My Chatting for Vincent app. I actually included it here. That's interesting. Okay. So I don't know why that came up. And I can't read it on this little tiny screen. So I want to actually move my head. Yeah. And so we'll bring this up. Go. And we don't need the asset store. Well, this is not working very well. Man, I'm really messing this up. Okay, so there's the room. I've been working on it in the Unity, and the cool thing now is that I can hit the play button, goes into game mode, and brings it up on the HTC Vive, so I can actually look at it while I'm in the Mac system. Um, Essentially, I see this being beneficial if you're creating cardboard. I'm thinking maybe Daydream is going to be coming to iOS. We'll see. But this gives you an opportunity to actually create VR content and review it without actually having a fancy PC that you're testing and then trying to bring it over to a Mac and then try to test it. So I think until they come out with a Mac Mini that supports discrete cards at a reasonable price, this seems like a viable solution. Sadly, there's talk about their new open-ended Mac Pro being about $5,000, and really, that's, in my opinion, a ridiculous cost. And I'm hoping that they have something new. All right, so to sum up, if you want to build one of these little things, you need to get a compatible motherboard. Tony Mac does a great job of going through what's compatible, hard drives, discrete cards, most importantly, motherboards and CPUs. And then you just basically throw that all together and apply some of their tools and then use their form. For instance, the problem I had with this, with the discrete card, especially with the High Sierra, is that once you added the web drivers for the NVIDIA card, the screen just showed up as black. And I actually found another tool from another site that I'll put in the show notes that got me past that. But it's not without its problems. I've noticed that I've kind of had to tweak the settings in the Steam VR in order for give me the ability to walk around. I'm not sure if this is actually using direct mode or extended. And obviously, as you're aware of, direct mode is the direction you want to go. And you need to also make sure that you enable Metal 2 in the editor. And I noticed when I had done that in the past, it may be better now with this version of this beta version, that the screen would black out for seconds and come back and became very irritating. And the only way that I could um, solve that issue was by turning off the I can think of it, the Metal 2 capability in the editor, and then it worked like a normal Mac under Unity. So keep that in mind. If you're going to be running it for VR, it's not quite perfect. And also, I have a feeling that my system might be a little bit underpowered. So you might want to throw a little more hardware at it. Maybe go with an i5 instead of an i3, and maybe a GTX 1060. They don't have a half height version, but as you can see, there's plenty of space. Actually, you can. Let me jump back to this screen. There is plenty of space on top of some of these cases, or you can just buy a case like the one I use for my backpack if you don't need a lot of space. Plus, they have some cool tower type cases that support an external card. So you could probably go with a 1060, and they've got a couple of nice, not half height, but what do you want to call it? Half length cards. So they would support a small compact mini ITX system, but they're full height. So you'll need to make sure you get a case for those. I have not found a half height 1060. So if you really want to do this right, I'd probably do it with a 1060. But if you got some old stuff laying around, maybe even like a GTX 970, you could probably throw it together. Again, make sure that you have a legitimate license. You might be able to pick up an old Mac for something for $100, $200 for that. Or you may already have a Mac that's kind of going to the wayside. So until they come out with some beefier hardware, as a standalone unit like a Mac Mini, because I've already have the monitors, and plus I want to use this for the HTC Vive. So having a monitor is not the most important thing. This might be a viable solution for you. And I don't know if that many people have tried it, but it does seem to work fairly well. And again, there are some glitches. Actually, I was playing, the only game that I could find that was free was something called Tennis Blob or Blobby Tennis, which was kind of fun. I mean, some guy did a review on, thought it sucked, but it's low quality graphics, but the motions were pretty cool. I was able to bat tennis balls back and forth between this like gooey blob on the other side of the net. And it's available and the other formats too besides macOS. So if you're interested in that, I would move forward and come up with some old parts and throw it together. And you'll have yourself a little Hackintosh that can help you in development. Uh, Along with, if you know, like me, I've got a couple of Macs that I use, but this allows me to provide a discrete GPU. I know some of you are thinking, well, why don't you just go with a Lightning Port 3? Well, my Macs aren't that new. And also, that costs a pretty penny. Not only do you have to have a card, but you have to spend $300 to $500 in a Thunderbolt 3 case with power supply. And so there's an extra cost there. In fact, what they spend on the case, I can buy the whole PC here. I think with board and everything, case and power supply, maybe $400, 500 at most. So you spend almost that much just on the Thunderbolt itself. So kind of keep that in mind. Okay, that's about wraps it up for today's show. Let me jump back to my main camera. And like I said, next week we're going to probably spend the entire time taking the Jasper Brekel motion capture information and doing something with it. Today I just had a lot of hardware I wanted to talk about and kind of give my 2 cents on it. Um, so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to either leave a comment on the YouTube video or you can email me at info@allthings3d.net. And so, on that note, I will see you on Saturday with some more 3D news. Bye.